Hello everyone and welcome to the special breaking news vortex where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris coming to you from the Synod here in Rome. Following up on a Synod showdown report we brought you yesterday about the constant pro-homosexual rhetoric coming from the daily press briefings, and by way of catching you up, each day there are hour-long press conferences from 1 o'clock until 2 o'clock. In order to gain access, you need to be accredited by the Holy See Press Office, which means a lengthy, detailed application asking a bunch of questions about you, your organization, etc. You fill this out months before you get here. There's no way the press office gives out credentials to just anybody. So at Thursday's press conference, it was remarkable indeed that the executive director, get this, the executive director of New Ways Ministry, a fake Catholic pro-gay group, asked a question, of course, about the issues related to sodomy. New Ways Ministry has been denounced by various bishops and cardinals in its long 35-year history. And to be very clear, New Ways is nothing else than a lobby group for homosexual so-called rights. The man who asked the question, the executive director, Francis DiBernardo, asked his question by announcing his name and not saying New Ways Ministry, but the blog page he writes for New Ways Ministry, Bondings 2.0.
Francis DiBernardo, Bondings USA. This question is for Archbishop Buckle and any of the others who would like to respond.
Again, the question, how did an openly gay blogger who advocates for same-sex marriage and the Catholic Church to accept it and bless it get credentials to get into that press conference? They guard those credentials like their lives. He isn't media. He has no professional background in media. He's an advocate for gay rights, period. And at this point, all eyes turn to Father Thomas Rosica, a man who is never without a friendly word for the gay subculture. Just 2 days before, here is what he was saying on the issue before the world press in the same Holy See press office.
There must be an end to exclusionary language and a strong emphasis on embracing reality as it is, and we should not be afraid of new and complex situations. The language must be renewed, and there was a close link made with the Jubilee of Mercy. The Jubilee of Mercy that will begin in December also requires a new form of language, both public and private. The Jubilee of Mercy requires a language of mercy. In particular, in speaking about homosexuals or gay persons, we do not pity gay persons, but we recognize them for who they are.
Rosica is constantly campaigning for the acceptance of homosexuality, a merciful embrace. He has been one of the cheerleaders of not only homosexuality, but the acceptance of Holy Communion for divorced and civilly remarried Catholics. Since last year's Synod, he has traveled to various venues giving the same pro-gay, pro-communion for adulterers speech. His radical positions have earned him the spotlight of faithful Catholic reporters and bloggers. And you might recall that Father Rosica, an influential Vatican spokesman, actually threatened to sue a Canadian blogger until it became a huge story in the Catholic media earlier this year, which Church Militant broke, and he was ordered to back off by his superiors in Rome, so he dropped the lawsuit. But Father Rosica's history with regard to faithfulness is a long, spotted one. When he was in seminary and still a deacon, he gave an interview to a local Canadian paper where he expressed some very strange ideas on ecumenism and shared Holy Communion. He went on to establish Salt and Light TV in Canada, a little-viewed, little-known cable outfit where he routinely brings on questionable guests. For example, Gregory Baum, a wildly liberal priest who was eventually excommunicated because he got married without being laicized, not to mention his wildly radical views. Rosica personally interviewed this man on his TV outfit and gushed like a schoolgirl.
Gregory, I want to thank you. You have been for me and continue to be a real model of hope. Gaudium et Spes, joy and hope. And you're on the eve of your 90th birthday, alive and well, evergreen, and I think I know what's kept you evergreen. Thank you very much for coming to us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
He's carried the banner for the acceptance of gays in the church for quite a time now, and always walks right up to the edge, always careful to never cross the line, but always pushing the envelope. So, It shouldn't be surprising that at this synod, where he has great control and influence over what is published and reported in the English-speaking world, which is of course the most influential media in the world, that Father Rosica is continually presenting the pro-gay messaging. And adding fuel to the fire, various bishops are now telling faithful Catholic media outlets that what is being reported in the press hall is not exactly what's going on in the synod hall. In the synod hall, there's wide-ranging discussions in all the small circle groups covering a huge range of topics relating to the family, but in the press room, you'd get the impression, thanks to Father Rosica, that the most talked about issue is gay stuff, or at least it's one of the most talked about. For example, to show you how the media message is being manipulated, you will recall last year there was a huge revolt on Thursday in the synod hall, that week of the synod, where the cardinals and the bishops pounded on their desks and yelled and demanded that the synod stop being manipulated. The revolt was led by Australian Cardinal George Pell. The Pope himself had to intervene and tell the synod organizers to give the delegates what they wanted. This was an open revolt against the masters of manipulation, but when the press briefing happened, listen to how Father Rosica, one of the message massagers, portrayed it.
I've been present for 3 synods now. What I witnessed this morning was one of the most significant things I have seen on the synod floor. It is a synod. People talked very openly, and it is a very important step in the process of the renewing of the synodal process. Next point, last point. There are suggestions made in those texts which are very helpful, very significant. So rather than playing the game of saying this outdoes that and this is canceled or whatever, try to read it together as a whole. I found this morning extremely inspiring, very encouraging, and reflective of a maturity of the synodal process.
What he conveyed to the world press, or rather how he portrayed it, was bordering on underhanded. He described it as a giant unity. What it was, in fact, was an in-your-face stare-down against Synod General Secretary Cardinal Lorenzo Baldessari and his gang of manipulating Machiavellian wannabes. But that isn't how Rosica portrayed it, not even close. So now we are at round 2, the second synod. Father Rosica is once again portraying things going on in the synod hall that bishops in the synod hall are saying are not true the way it's being characterized at these press conferences. He's talking way too much about gay issues, and the bishops are saying they aren't really that prevalent in the discussions. And then this little gem. On Tuesday, this past Tuesday, as Father Rosica sat on the dais very near to a Canadian Archbishop, Paul-André Durocher, who made some rather disturbing comments about church doctrine.
If you want to check what is doctrine, you buy Denzinger, the big volume, and you go look it up and try to find it where it's written, you know?
As the Archbishop was leaving the press hall, a journalist priest confronted him about his un-Catholic comments. That priest had his credentials yanked almost immediately. So step back and look at this situation for a moment. A priest who confronts an archbishop for oddball statements gets sacked, yet the leader of a gay rights group who has nothing to do with journalism gets a free pass and is allowed in day after day after day. What's going on? One conclusion is simply that Father Rosica is manipulating the message to the English-speaking reporters, making sure that English-speaking bishops and cardinals who toe the liberal line are the ones who get the lion's share of the time in front of the microphone up on that dais, and that the steady drumbeat of this gay stuff here and gay stuff there keeps getting brought up. As we've reported earlier this week, the Vatican Press Office just doesn't do English, the most influential language on earth. Father Lombardi, the Vatican press spokesman for the Pope, doesn't know English. So he brought in Father Rosica to download all the English-speaking stuff for the press. It's a safe bet, in fact, that English-speaking Archbishop Durocher was brought onto the Tuesday dais by Father Rosica. And recall that Durocher went on to dismiss and politely trash Cardinal Erdo's Monday speech, which was as faithful to the magisterium as you could get.
I see Cardinal Erdo's presentation as an important part, an important piece, but it is one piece as we move forward in trying to listen to the voice of the Spirit leading us forward in the task which is ours.
It would be shocking to learn that Rosica had nothing to do with that. So, a good chunk of what you read in the English-speaking media world has Father Rosica's fingerprints all over it, and he has an agenda. which is oftentimes hard to square with the faith. Again, how are enemies of the faith who deny the teachings for a living, who are not professional reporters, not even close to it, but lobbyists for an anti-Catholic cause, getting press credentials while priests who are journalists are getting tossed out? The bottom line in all this manipulation is this: how can anyone trust what's actually being presented at the press briefings? And to wrap up, it was somewhat funny, given all this, that at the most recent presser, Father Lombardi said, in Italian, "We need to trust the process." Reporting from Rome on our continuing coverage of the Synod on the Family, this is Michael Voris for ChurchMilitant.com. God love you, and keep the church in your prayers. There are traitors everywhere.